Boker Tov, Chaverim, and welcome to yet another edition of Taste of Torah. Now, you may have noticed that I began my Taste of Torah series going on 2 years ago now by preferring to use clips from shows and popular culture, and now I'm reverting to something else. It's called an object lesson. It's when you take a simple object that you may or may not have some familiarity with, and you use it as an illustration for the idea you want to get across. So our Torah portion this week is Pekudei. Pekudei is the very last Parsha for the book of Exodus or the book of Shemot, and it is part of our traditional system of double portions. Now, what object am I going to show you to illustrate the concept of the double portion? This is it. This is this wonderful little object I picked up a number of years ago. It may have been given to me. I don't really recall how I got it. But in any case, it is, as you can see, a pointer. If this were a Jewish object, we'd call it a yod. But it's not. But what I really love about this object is its telescoping, all right? And it can just go on and on and on, and what was about 6 inches long is now about 3 feet long. It's really cool. So, why am I showing you this? Because that is an object lesson for the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar is designed to be telescoping. As you may know, we have a lunar system adjusted to the solar calendar. How do we adjust it? We adjust it by periodically adding an additional month so that the too short for a full trip around the Earth lunar cycle can be expanded to reflect the full journey around the Earth solar cycle. That way we keep all of our holidays on the right season. And the way we do that is every few years we stick in a leap month. And that's exactly what's happening this year. We are actually now in what this year would be called First Adar. The First Adar and Second Adar is the leap month that we periodically stick in there. So in fact, Purim will be celebrated on Second Adar rather than the First Adar, and that will realign us with the sun and keep our holidays in approximately the same place. Of course, that also explains why it is that it seems that Jewish holidays seem to occasionally hop back and forth between the Western calendar dates. And sometimes we're celebrating Hanukkah at the end of November, and sometimes it extends into January. It's because of the addition of those leap months. So, for the purposes of our Torah portions, the way we deal with that is that we have an accordion system for our reading. There are certain portions of the readings of the Torah that are grouped together as double portions. In other words, there's two together. So, for example, V'yachel, our portion from last week, and Pekudei, most of the time are known as Vayachel Pekudei. They're all compressed together. However, on this particular year, Pekudei has been pulled out in order to fill in that space for the leap month. So now you know what you didn't know before, though I suspect many of you basically understood what was going on. So what's happening there at the very culminating Torah portion at the end of the book of Exodus, at the end of the book of Shemot? As it turns out, because it is a double portion, it's pretty short. It's a little more than 2 chapters long. And if I were to describe it, I would describe it as the accountant's portion. Because what happens is that even though in Truma we are commissioned to build the Mishkan and we collect gifts and donations, and then in our previous Torah portion we do an additional resource drive, and then we start building the Mishkan. In this portion, we yet again account for all the materials that have been collected for this sacred project, and the project is completed. So we learn about just how much gold by weight and how much silver by weight and how much material by length has been used in building the Mishkan. I don't know quite how to describe it. For those of you who've read Moby Dick, it's the Moby Dick of Jewish portions. Just like for some reason, the author felt in Moby Dick that he had to give us over 100 pages about how to fit out a whaler with all the different widgets and ropes and sheets and materials. So too, we once again in detail visit this theme. So now, it ends on a very, very powerful note, because now the temple has been complete, or the portable sanctuary has been completed, and it is set into action. And then the most dramatic thing happens, and that is that a cloud, like the cloud that stood upon Mount Sinai when he revealed the Torah and the commandments, descends and takes a place over the Mishkan. So the Mishkan is in a permanent fog. It's in a permanent cloud, and that signifies God's presence, which is pretty darn awesome. And by the way, we know this experience. If anyone's ever found themselves in a fog or going up a mountain and driving into a cloud, the eerie, awesome, otherworldly, uncanny experience that is. So draw upon your own experience, and you'll have some sense of what that must have felt like. So there's a couple of big ideas going on in our Torah portion. First is the importance to be accountable. And a good congregation, well run, does a good job of being accountable for the donations and the gifts and the pledges that are given to it. And that is a tradition that goes all the way back to Pekudei. So it's good policy then, it's good policy now. Now, we also get a detailed report on the gowns and vestments and objects of the priesthood. We are told that these objects are holy, and therefore we understand that to a certain extent, being a leader in Jewish tradition is holy. And yet, still, we do an accounting of all the objects and all their values, which reminds us that not only is being a leader holy, but it's about being accountable. And we need to hold our leaders to this day accountable. And that's good Torah. That's good Jewish policy. Now, next thing I'd point out is that the description of how the Mishkan is assembled, the verbs they use, like form and create and shape, are all parallel to the language of creation in the beginning of Genesis. And this hints at a very important idea about cosmic correspondence that is being expressed here. Just as God creates the world, our ancestors create the temple in the world in the form of the Mishkan that is, using the Greek term, a microcosm. It represents the universe. And so we are doing a profound act of imitating God by building the temple just as God built the universe. And specifically, we are told that we may work 6 days, but we have to rest on the seventh, which of course also parallels creation. So here we find ourselves once again junior partners in the work of creation. We are God's co-creators, even if we are creators writ small. And I cannot emphasize again that the creation theology in our tradition is very powerful. We are meant to be builders. We are meant to be creators. We should take pride in our capacity to do that, whether it's the ability to build a building, to create music, or to build a better world. All of these things are implicit in this Torah portion. But finally, what I want to talk to you about is this peculiar thing about the cloud. This happens again and again, that God becomes manifest in some way on earth in the form of an angel or in the form of a theophany, lightning and thunder and some luminous presence. And yet, once it comes to terra firma, once it comes to earth, it is often described as being surrounded or shrouded in a cloud. Well, that's so interesting, and I think it has something interesting to teach us. I alluded to the idea that driving into a cloud or driving through a fog or standing in a fog is a very eerie, very uncanny experience. And I think it actually stands as a kind of metaphor for experiencing a miracle in the real world in real time. We'd like to think that a miracle is going to be the one where someone is raised from the dead. They just pop out of the grave and they're fully intact and their clothing's in good shape. Or if you're Christian, you like to imagine that a 900-foot Jesus is just going to appear in front of you. Or going to any other religious tradition, you want something stark and obvious and irrefutable to happen. But that's not how miracles work. There's always an ambiguity. There's a moment when we subjectively experience something that feels transcendent, that takes us beyond what we're used to experiencing. And yet, we can't see everything. We can't completely rule out the possibility that this is just an ordinary phenomenon. Is it a cloud, or is it the glory of God? We don't know. But what we do know is that it's profound, it's different from our normal experiences, and it touches us at our deepest core. I think these appearances of God in cloud is meant to convey that idea that our lives are ambiguous, that we don't all understand all the causality or all the reasons that the things that happen to us happen. And yet, it is not wrong to say that at certain times, in certain places, under certain conditions, we have something that feels like a miracle, that seems absolutely awesome and beyond our understanding, that moves us in ways that ordinary life doesn't move us. And so actually, I think the image of the cloud coming down upon the Mishkan and knowing that God is present in that cloud is a fabulous allegory for what it is like to have a transcendent experience in human life. Well, with that, I'm going to stop. And I'm going to turn it over. It's a short one this week because it's a short Torah portion. And I look forward to talking with you next week. Let's take ourselves out of here. Goodbye, Shabbat. No, not Shabbat. Shalom, Chaverim. Goodbye, my friends. And I look forward to talking with you next week.